The Memphis Grizzlies came out and dominated the Denver Nuggets on Saturday night in Memphis. Goodness gracious, did that team need it. However, the way that they did it, the way that they dominated, both on the floor in FedEx Forum and how they're dominating the development game further south in South Haven, is worth mentioning. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on here on this episode of a Monday Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, hello there. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies, a Monday, Victory Edition, Victory Monday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, flying solo once again as DeMichael continues to work through with his family, the process of everything that's going on with his brother. Not to belabor that fact, excuse me, you guys that listen every day know that, but I just want to continue. For those that maybe don't listen each and every day, although you should, what are you doing if you're not listening every day? DeMichael Cole will be back with us, but continue to work through those things with family, and that's exactly where he needs to be. We'll keep holding down the ship until DeMichael's ready to rejoin full-time. I'm glad he was able to be with us last week for that one episode. That was great to see him. Locked On Grizzlies is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. The Friday episode was very popular over the weekend. I'm guessing it's because I lost my mind and yelled a lot. That seems to have good vibes for our views and our downloads. But that's not going to happen on this episode, at least not on the docket. It's not on the outline, so to speak. We'll see where the next 30 minutes or so takes us. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. The Memphis Grizzlies are in a very unique position because they find themselves in a spot where, as of this moment, and obviously this can change with games finishing and all that sort of thing, the Memphis Grizzlies have the easiest schedule remaining, according to tankathon.com. They are looking at a .468 win percentage among their 23 remaining opponents. And that is significant because the Grizzlies just got done playing two pretty good opponents, one in the Philadelphia 76ers this past Thursday, and then Saturday night, the Grizzlies took on the Denver Nuggets. And the Denver Nuggets, I'm sure you know, are the team that is currently in front of the Memphis Grizzlies in the Western Conference in the standings. Denver 5 games up on Memphis as of this recording. The Grizzlies are closer to the Sacramento Kings than they are the Nuggets in terms of the 1 seed. The Kings are breathing down the Grizzlies' neck, so to speak, for the number 2 seed. So Memphis needs to keep winning to keep that ground, and they maybe need to hope Sacramento keeps losing. But the Kings have one of the tougher schedules the rest of the way, so maybe that will happen to Sacramento. But I digress. On Saturday night, the Grizzlies took on the Denver Nuggets, and while Memphis had Luke Kennard back, and while Memphis was at home, and they're one of the NBA's best teams at home this season, they currently have a record after the Nuggets win of 25-5 at home. There were reasons for concern, right? I outlined a lot of them on Friday, talking about the overplaying of Xavier Tillman, depending on him too much, because it's not that X was playing poorly, and we'll talk more about X throughout the episode, but it was about X being asked to do too much. And Jaren Jackson Jr., your all-star, your defensive player of the year, not being asked to do enough. Saturday rolls around, and wouldn't you know it, Xavier Tillman gets the start. And I believe I tweeted something along the lines of MJF's mid when I saw that starting lineup from AEW, because that is not a lineup that, in my opinion, has a very high ceiling, right? Xavier Tillman is limited. He wouldn't have been sent to the Memphis Hustle, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, if that was someone who is in a position to consistently help you win basketball games. But to the credit of Xavier Tillman, for the second consecutive game, he went out there and defended one of the best bigs, arguably the best big in the entire NBA, and Nikola Jokic, admirably. Jokic still was able to get his shot. He still had an efficient game, Jokic did. He shot 7 for 11 from the floor. But he didn't have near the impact that he normally does offensively. He had another double-double, had 13 rebounds, but he was a minus 20 on the night. He had 3 assists and 3 turnovers, so a 1-to-1 ratio. Again, Jokic averages a triple-double. So that is the area of his game that drastically suffered the most. Scoring-wise, obviously more shots would have helped with that, and he was efficient in the scoring that he did. But the point is that Tillman was able to put him in a position where he was not able to be the dominant force that he had been throughout the season as a creator of offense for others. And because of that, the offense for Denver dried up pretty consistently, at least compared to what they're normally capable of doing. So Xavier Tillman had another strong contest, and we'll talk more about how that connects to what the team was in November and December when Xavier Tillman was playing for the G-League Memphis Hustle, and how the team uses the hustle, because I do think that should be reflected on. It's been talked about before, but not necessarily by me here on Locked On Grizzlies. So I do want to touch on that because Xavier Tillman is kind of another success story of how Memphis utilizes their development program. I want to give a shout out to Tyus Jones, another player that I've been hard on this year, not just here on Locked On Grizzlies, but over at my Substack, Written in the Dark. My last post over at Written in the Dark goes live Monday. I'm joining Bluff City Media on Wednesday. I'll talk more about that over the next couple of days. Very excited for that move, going over there with my former GBB buddies, no longer former. The next chapter of Grizzly Bear Blues. I'm excited to be a part of it as a Grizzlies columnist. We'll talk more about that and how you can subscribe at the end of the show. I wrote about how, not just at Written in the Dark, but here on Locked On Grizzlies, Tyus Jones having success as a starter for Memphis, being a successful starting player in place of Ja Morant, but struggling, comparatively speaking, as a reserve. And when you're paid $15 million a year, that's not good enough. You are paid to be the best backup point guard in the NBA. You need to be that. And Tyus, again, on Saturday night in a game where Desmond Bane didn't have it, Desmond struggled on Saturday. Desmond did not look himself. I think he was 4 for 13 or something like that. Not the efficient score that you hope to see, but Tyus Jones picked up some of that weight. Luke Kennard was 4 for 5 from beyond the arc. He picked up a lot of that weight. He and Tyus both off the bench were extremely valuable scorers from 3, and Denver was not able to make up that ground. So the starters outplayed the Denver Nuggets. The Grizzlies starters did. And then the bench built on it. It was a true team effort in the game on Saturday. And those are the types of games, those are the types of efforts that it's going to take for Memphis to fully realize what they are capable of this season. They can't just depend on one guy. Ja Morant, isolation, pick and roll sets, they're getting predictable. And while kicking out to an open shooter in the corner like Luke Kennard, who every time he shoots a corner 3, I think it's going in. That's great to have, but you have to have some variety to what you do schematically. And I think that they did a better job of that on Saturday. They found their rhythm. They let their pace, not just running up and down the floor, but their pace within their half-court sets. There was more movement. There was more viability in terms of the types of shots they were getting. There was more consistency in the effort to try to maintain that pace. They seemed more lively. And it doesn't mean that they weren't lively in Philly for the first 3 quarters of that game, or at least the first half. They were absolutely, certainly the first quarter. On Thursday night, they were pretty lively against the 76ers. The Sixers just woke up. In the Saturday night game, the Grizzlies didn't let Denver wake up. And Denver had another game to play. That's important to point out. And the Nuggets were able to find their footing, so to speak, and are, hoping to be able to bounce back against the Clippers, right? And against other teams moving forward. But that was a shocking turn of events in terms of the way that Memphis dominated that basketball game, because they didn't have Steven Adams, who in theory is a better matchup against Jokic. They didn't have the ability to use Xavier Tillman off the bench or to use Brandon Clark in a different way, or Santi Aldama. It's going to bring up an interesting question of who's going to be that fourth big. Maybe it's a matchup-based thing. The depth of this team is something that needs to be discussed, and that depth has been developed not just this year, but over the last several years through the way that the Memphis Grizzlies use their G-League team, their affiliate, the Memphis Hustle, which is just a stone's throw away at the Landers Center there in South Haven. We're going to talk more about how that team that is connected to the Grizzlies has helped Memphis get to this point next year on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by PrizePicks. On Tuesday night, if you're taking Ja Morant to score more than 26.5 points, I think that's a safe choice. I also think it's a safe choice to see LeBron James grab more than 7.5 rebounds. He probably will be a lock for that, assuming he plays against the Grizzlies on Tuesday night there in Memphis. Maybe you want to take Jaren Jackson Jr. having more than 2.5 blocks. Those are all things that you can do over at PrizePicks, where you can take 2 to 6 players, say they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any given entry. What I like most about PrizePicks is you're not competing against others, you're competing against the projections that are available. This is available for the NBA, Major League Baseball is getting ready to start up, National Hockey League, basketball, both levels of college basketball, men's and women's. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They're operational in over 30 states as well as Canada with safe and fast withdrawals. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We are talking about the Memphis Hustle and how the Hustle are helping the Grizzlies hustle the rest of the NBA next year on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, flying solo. Once again, the wonderful DeMichael Cole, the beat writer over for the Commercial Appeal, covering the Memphis Grizzlies, will be joining us again later on this week, but just continuing to finalize things and spend time with his family during this difficult time for them. So continue to keep them in your thoughts. Our condolences go out to them again. Earlier in the show, we talked about Xavier Tillman being the catalyst for the performance these last 2 games, because as angry as I was on Friday, and I was mad, if you watched that episode, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. That first segment, I was hot. I thought I was justified because they overextended Xavier Tillman and asked too much of him. And part of the reason I think they asked too much of him is because of his role on the Memphis Grizzlies roster. He is an end of rotation big. He is at best their 4th best big. And that is if you discount what Santi Aldama has done this season, which I hesitate to do. So if you're asking me, and I guess technically DeMichael's not here right now, it's my show at the moment, he's the 5th best big on the roster, Xavier Tillman is. So to make Xavier Tillman play 32 minutes in a game against an NBA Finals contender, I'm not a huge fan of that. I wasn't a huge fan of him playing as much as he did against the Timberwolves in the playoffs when it was deemed that Steven Adams wasn't able to play. I didn't think that was the best use of Xavier Tillman either. And that kind of held true because X, as good as he is in terms of lateral movement defensively, he's one of the best bigs in the NBA at creating steals. He has value to his game. And he was offensively effective early on against the Nuggets on Saturday. I think he scored the first 3 buckets of the game for the Grizzlies. That is not what you expect from Xavier Tillman. His ceiling is not as high as Jaren Jackson Jr. Steven Adams was a lottery pick. Brandon Clark, Santi Aldama even. Those are all guys that were first-round picks. Xavier Tillman, second-round guy, just doesn't have the same physical attributes. But he's playing at a high level, and he is a professional enough player that when he gets sent down to the Memphis Hustle, the G-League affiliate, the level below in terms of development for the NBA, he is willing to take that in stride. And I think that is massively important for this Grizzlies organization moving forward. And again, this has been talked about other places, but I haven't had a chance to give my take on it here on Locked On Grizzlies. So here we go. Whether it's John Conchar, right? Because John Conchar was originally a 2-way player. He started out in the Grizzlies organization with the Memphis Hustle and has worked his way up to an end of rotation player for the Memphis Grizzlies. Whether it is Santi Aldama, who has a first-round pick in the 2020 NBA draft, or 2021 NBA draft, excuse me. He was a guy that was, put in a position where he could kind of find his footing and be allowed to play a little bit down with the hustle. The Grizzlies are using the multitudes of picks that they have to get these guys reps and playing time with the G-League Memphis Hustle. They've done it with Zaire Williams most recently. For the first time, he was sent down to the G League as the 10th overall pick in that same draft as Santi Aldama. That could be a bit of a shock to the system. And the same thing is true of Xavier Tillman in terms of being a player who's in his third year in the NBA, who theoretically should be better than the Memphis Hustle at this stage. In theory, he should be. DeMichael and I talked about this earlier on in the season when Xavier Tillman went down to Summer League and was unable to dominate the Summer League. That was cause for concern. You don't look at a Summer League performance and say, oh, they shot 4 for 12. That guy can't play. Can't play. Not worth it. Shouldn't be on the floor. That's not wise. But when you have a player that you expect to be in the mix for NBA rotational minutes, and he can't go to Summer League and dominate, that's cause for concern. That's reason to pause. And that, for X, was one of the reasons that DeMichael and I had our reservations about him and his future on the roster. Now, fast forward a couple of months, several months from the Summer League, and just a couple from him being in the G League because he wasn't getting minutes with the big club. And he is defending Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic about as well as you could expect anybody to do. And whether or not I think Brandon Clark should start more or play more, or, my lineups and rotations, I still stand by those things because the numbers in my eyes tell me that Brandon Clark is better than Xavier Tillman. But at the same time, the last 2 games, X deserves all the credit in the world for being a guy to show that you can go from a place like being demoted to the G League, come back and use that time appropriately to work on your game and gain some confidence. And you can hope that Xavier Tillman will be an inspiration for a guy like Zaire Williams, who has to be disappointed. There is a glaring gap in this Grizzlies roster. Even with Luke Kennard playing well against Denver, he's going to be in the rotation. That's unquestioned. Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard, they're going to be guys that are in a playoff rotation, you would imagine. Zaire Williams as a big wing, a true perimeter player, he makes a ton of sense for this team in a variety of ways, and they bet on him. Part of the DeAnthony Melton trade was giving more minutes to a guy like Zaire Williams. To this point, that hasn't fleshed out, and that doesn't mean that Zaire is a busted pick, but it does mean that he's not good enough to be in their rotation at this moment, so they're putting him in the G League to try to regain some of that confidence and to work on the aspects of his game that he is currently not doing at a high enough level for the Grizzlies scheme. 3-point shooting, creating off the dribble, all those sorts of things that they clearly value, Zaire has struggled with. So the G League development system, when we talk about these Grizzlies coaches, it's not just Taylor Jenkins and his staff with the NBA team. It's the guys at the hustle level, because they are finding ways to get these young players minutes, development of time and live reps that you just can't replace. There's no replacement for live basketball reps. No matter how much you practice, how much you put tape on a ballroom floor, and you walk around and you talk about things, live reps are the best thing possible for a player getting better. And I think the Grizzlies, there's other organizations that use the G League team well too, but I think the Grizzlies deserve a lot of credit for being one of the very best at it. Because Xavier Tillman's just the latest example. Again, John Conchar, Santi Aldama, Jake LaRavia has been getting a lot of rotation minutes and playing time with the Memphis Hustle. They don't have opportunity with the big squad right now. Doesn't mean that they won't have it a year or two down the road. It's almost like what Major League Baseball does with their farm systems. You have a guy down in AAA that maybe your pitching staff is loaded, but next year or 2 years down the road, you're not going to be able to pay that guy, and you're going to need to replace him with someone that knows your system, understands scheme, and has been getting live developmental minutes, even though the difficulty steps up as you go up to the next level. At least they are familiar with your system. They're familiar with your terminology, the coaching staff. I think one of the coolest things about the Memphis Hustle is you see Grizzlies players and coaches there all the time when they have home games. All the time they're down there. Obviously, it was Grizzlies night recently, and a large chunk of the Grizzlies organization was down there. But even on random Wednesday nights, Ja Morant will be there. Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Kleiman. They invest not just treasure into developing that space in that area and making the hustle feel like a bigger deal. They invest time and they invest energy. And I think you see the fruits of it when guys like Xavier Tillman can go from barely being on the roster to being able to step in and contribute at a high level against two of the best guys in the NBA. Hopefully that energy continues, not just this year, but every year moving forward, because that's how the Grizzlies, a major piece of how the Grizzlies are going to stay championship contenders in the Western Conference. Speaking of the Western Conference, we're going to take a quick look at the lay of the land, who Memphis might be playing in a projected first-round series, things that we are nervous about entering into this week of games. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I love Built Bar, and you should love Built Bar too. They are delicious. They are surprisingly healthy for you, and you got to give them a shot if you haven't already done so. With Built, healthy is actually tasty, and if you're trying to lose a few pounds or just maybe be a little bit healthier coming out of the holiday season a couple months ago, like me, you got to give them a shot. Real chocolate is what makes Built Bars so good, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. That's my personal favorite. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, a whopping 17 grams of protein. I'm not sure how they do it, but they get it done over at Built. And you don't need to wait around to get a box. You can still go to Built.com and place your order today, but you can also run down to your local Walmart, your local Sam's Club. At Walmart, you can get a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Or if you're close to a Sam's Club, go get a 13-bar box with brownie batter or churro as your options. Again, shout out to Built Bar, a tremendous sponsor of Locked On Grizzlies. We are fans of them here, and you should be giving them a shot because not only are they healthy, but they're also pretty delicious. The lay of the land in the Western Conference and a preview of what's to come in terms of Grizzlies' schedule this week. Next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. Finishing up here on this Monday, I am your host, Joe Mullinax. Again, shout out to DeMichael Cole, my partner, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, covering the Memphis Grizzlies. Spending time with family, that's the most important thing, first and foremost. So continuing to grind it out on our end. I'm very appreciative of DeMichael and all that he's done for the show, and we look forward to having him back here soon. The Memphis Grizzlies, as of this recording, and that's important to point out because the Denver Nuggets play the Clippers. As of this recording, Sacramento up a few points on the Sacramento a few points on the Thunder. So this varies, right? This ebbs and flows and changes. The Grizzlies, in terms of their space, regardless of when you're listening to this particular episode, whatever happens with the Nuggets and the Kings, the Grizzlies are the 2 seed, right? The Kings are a game or so behind. The Nuggets are several games in front. Memphis is solidly the 2 seed in the Western Conference. And the Kings are getting close, but as we've talked about, the Kings have a pretty difficult schedule ahead. So it seems like as the next few weeks play out, Sacramento could fall back away from where Memphis is, as long as the Grizzlies can continue to find ways to win. But one of the interesting things about this Grizzlies team and the schedule they're facing this week in particular is how they are going to line up and measure up with a surprisingly improved, and maybe we shouldn't be surprised, Los Angeles Lakers team. We're not going to preview that game right now because that's going to be our topic for Tuesday's show. But obviously, the Lakers are finding their footing. They knock off the Dallas Mavericks. LeBron being surrounded by competent NBA players. Who knew that would make such a major difference? But it has for the Lakers, and they are markedly improved. Why do I bring up the Lakers, even though we're not previewing that game here in this moment? The Lakers are a game or so away from the play-in. And depending on how they do in their play-in matchups, they could be a team that could be in the mix for a first-round series with the Grizzlies. That could be a preview of things to come on Tuesday night. But if the season ended today, which of course it doesn't because that would be weird, the Memphis Grizzlies would be playing the winner of a Timberwolves, Utah Jazz, Golden State Warriors kind of situation. And obviously there's one team that the Memphis Grizzlies would like to avoid at all costs in the first round, and that would be the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are, of course, extremely ingrained with this team's psyche. if that makes sense. They are a team that is very much part of what the Grizzlies experience is. And while the Grizzlies themselves would not admit it, I, as a host on Locked On Grizzlies, will happily say, no, thank you, right? No, thank you to a Warriors matchup in the first round. Eventually, you'll probably have to play those guys, but not necessarily in the first round, right? The Timberwolves, the Jazz, the Pelicans, even the Lakers. Obviously, the Lakers will be an interesting pairing if it were to come to that. Those are all teams that theoretically match up a heck of a lot better with the Grizzlies than the Warriors do, right? And you have to assume Steph Curry's health and, Andrew Wiggins getting back in the mix for the Warriors. You want to try to stay away from such a matchup. But not to kill the lead here, this is a difficult segment to do because this is just a reminder of the parity that exists within the Western Conference. Credit Sacramento. They've spaced themselves out a little bit at this point too. They're closer to the 2 seed of the Memphis Grizzlies than they are to the 4 seed of the Phoenix Suns at this stage. They're pretty solidly in front. But from Phoenix as the 4 seed all the way to the Portland Trail Blazers, that's the 13 seed as of this recording. And again, this is going to change just because there's games happening, right? But when you look at the Western Conference standings, regardless of who won and lost on Sunday night, opening up this NBA week, you have got 9 teams all within 4 or so games of each other. So it's possible that the Clippers get cold or the Mavericks get cold and they fall into the play-in. There's no real way of seeing and differentiating who is who once you get past the 3 seed of the Western Conference. And people continue to look for reasons, myself included, that the Kings are going to fall off, and that just hasn't manifested yet. They have not had that collapse. The Kings continue to find ways to win. So if Memphis doesn't continue to do the same thing, it could be Sacramento that leapfrogs the Grizzlies, and then Memphis has to start worrying about that situation where they're in a spot where they don't have home court advantage in that second round if the 2 seed Kings were to win. That could be an issue down the road. Still a lot of basketball to play. Again, Memphis has one of the easiest schedules left in the entire NBA. Sacramento, per tankathon, has one of the toughest ones. But the parity in the Western Conference. The Phoenix Suns have Kevin Durant now. The Clippers. When Kawhi Leonard actually plays, he looks like one of the best players in the whole world. Dallas has Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Who's going to defend? That's a great question. But stopping them is going to be challenging too in terms of limiting their offense and not letting them get to their spots offensively. The Timberwolves seem to have found a little bit of their groove of late. The Utah Jazz are probably the one team that'll continue to tumble, but Lauri Markkanen has played so well this season that maybe he won't. Maybe he won't let them. Maybe he'll play at a high enough level with the Jazz that they're going to stay in that play-in conversation. One of the reasons I'm comfortable saying that's not going to happen is you've got the Lakers who are trying like hell to get in and the Portland Trail Blazers who are trying like hell to get in. Utah very clearly not trying that much. Obviously, the players want to make the playoffs. Obviously, the coaches want to. But it's similar to what I've critiqued the Grizzlies front office of it until this trade deadline where they went and got Luke Kennard. They haven't made a contender trade, or they hadn't made a contender trade. The Utah Jazz most certainly aren't making contender trades. They were sellers at the deadline. So Utah is not going to be in that position to hold on to that space. I think it's safe to say that somebody like Portland or the Lakers are going to take over. But again, if the season ended today, it would be a 2-7 matchup against potentially the Timberwolves, the Jazz, the Warriors, the Pelicans. You want to avoid the Warriors at all costs. At least that's my personal take. You don't start losing to let Sacramento pass you per se. But a 7-seed Warriors team is concerning. Do I think the Warriors get healthy and hot enough when Steph returns that they get up into the top 5 seeds like they did last year? They were the 3 seed last year. Yeah, I think that's possible. I think the 4 seed is perhaps even probable once Steph comes back. They're only 2 games behind that. But you got to remember, the 4-seeded Phoenix Suns are about to have Kevin Durant added to their roster. I think March 1st is his target for his debut with Phoenix. And once that happens, good luck. Good luck trying to predict what's going to happen in a very busy and bustling Western Conference. All the Grizzlies can do, as a podcaster, as a blogger, I can sit off to the side and prognosticate and point and say this game's going to be tough and that game's going to be tough. All Memphis can do is play the games in front of them. And their upcoming schedule this week is not the easiest. They are going to have 3 games in 4 nights. They play a back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday against the Lakers, the aforementioned improved Lakers and the Houston Rockets, who are not improved. They're the worst team in the NBA, one of the worst teams in the NBA. Memphis should win that one. Then on Friday night, they're heading to Denver to take on the Nuggets, and then they play 2 games in LA, one against the Clippers on Sunday, one against the Lakers on Tuesday of next week. So 4 of the Grizzlies' next 5 games are on national television. And that is something that is worth noting because the Grizzlies haven't always been in that situation in terms of being on national TV. The Rockets game is the one that's not on national TV. But whether it's TNT or ESPN, the eyes of the NBA are going to be on Memphis as they continue to play these tougher games. I talk about how much easier the Grizzlies' schedule is as the season ends, and it does lighten up. But they're in a pretty difficult stretch at this moment, and they have to find ways to get wins because the Sacramento Kings are not going away anytime soon. And if they want to maintain their grasp on that number 2 seed, regardless of who they play in, they have to, or after the play-in, I should say, Memphis will be clear of the play-in, regardless of who the 7 seed is. If they want to maintain their ability to have home court in the second round, if it comes to that, they have to keep winning. And that obviously will start and continue with the Lakers this Tuesday at home. Big time game. Hopefully folks in Memphis will be coming out. Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen game to game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. We will preview Grizzlies Lakers on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. We will talk about what Los Angeles has done since the trade deadline, since their move for D'Angelo Russell and other very talented players that at least make the Lakers appear to have a functional rotation, right? A functional NBA rotation. Because LeBron James and Anthony Davis are still 2 of the 12 or so best players in the National Basketball Association. You add good, functional NBA talent around those guys, D'Angelo Russell probably being a little bit better than that, but you add a Jared Vanderbilt, you add a Malik Beasley. They are going to help that team immensely. And the Lakers are not going to be a cakewalk. They're not going to be a cupcake. Memphis is going to have to come in with the same mentality that they had against the Nuggets if they hope to hold that victory. So we're going to talk about Grizzlies, Lakers, and much more on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Continue to subscribe, rate, review, like, and comment over on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. It is much appreciated. I mentioned Bluff City Media earlier in the show. Very excited to be a Grizzlies columnist over at Bluff City Media starting on Wednesday. You can sign up for an annual subscription today. You go to bluffcitymedia.co/join. Use the promo code Mullinax for 10% off on an annual subscription. Go do that right now today. Promo code Mullinax. You get all my Grizzlies written content, plus Memphis Tigers, plus 901 Soccer, all sorts of different things over at Bluff City Media. Very excited to be joining them starting on Wednesday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Join us. Again, 10% off annual subscription. You can do it right now at bluffcitymedia.co/join with the promo code Mullinax. Go check that out. Sign up, please. Until tomorrow, I am your host, Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. I appreciate you. Stick with us. This is Locked On Grizzlies. Have a great Monday, and I'll see you Tuesday.